White sands, blue skies, we're having a good time.
We're on a vacation, we're on a vacation. You know, we party up, turn it up, turn it up, turn it up. We party up, turn it up, turn it up. We're on a vacation, we're on a vacation.
Drinking lemonade in the shade.
You know, we're on.
Welcome back to vlog episode number 8, Punts and Returns. Now this happened during the WPT meetup game at the Bellagio. This meetup game was happening unbeknownst to me, but I got a chance to meet some people like Brad Owen and Dan Shack, super cool guys, so let's jump into the action. The game starts and I'm employing my typical strategy, wanting to turn over some bluffs and some aggressive play to set my image at the table. Everything is starting out really well as I'm able to turn over a bluff for a fairly minor pot. As I've mentioned in previous vlogs, I really just want to get some action going at the table, show some bluffs down, show some big hands down, keep people guessing. Here I river a straight on a guy for a pretty decent pot. Again, everything's going pretty well so far. I'm winning some pots with some pretty marginal holdings. That's when I pick up Ace Jack. It's my first pretty decent pickup as a hand. It also seems to be where things start going wrong for me. I'm gonna cue this folding montage from an ice cold deck that seems to happen over the next 45 minutes to an hour. When I started playing a lot of poker, I realized that one of my shortcomings was whether I was sun running and running really well or on a downswing, I had a tendency to let it affect my future play, which is exactly what I think happens in the middle of this session. I remember my first really bad downswing as a poker player and realizing I needed to take a break because I was playing pretty timid. Here the opposite's occurring. I get my kings cracked when an ace hits the turn, when I knew I should have laid my hand down. Here I've got to lay down top 2 pair on the flop to what I know is a straight from a bet and a re-raise. Finally, I pick up a decent holding, an ace queen offsuit. It is raised to 15 by a player in the 8 seat after a few limps. I make the call for 15. The player to my direct left decides he's going to make the call to 15 as well. The player in the 6 seat also decides he's going to play along, and we are off 4 ways to a flop. Apologies for not including the pot size on this specific hand, but I'm just trying to illustrate how bad things are going for me. Here I flop top 2 pair, and with 4 players, I decide to bet out pretty strong, $40. The player in the 5 seat has about $80 behind, and he's cutting his chips out to make the call. This seems like this is going to be pretty easy. When the rest of the players fold their hands, I decide, you know what, I'm just going to go all in the dark. I know I have the best hand here. He takes another look at his cards real quick before pretty promptly committing his chips. I'm looking for a clean run out, but sure enough, the river hits him. I turn over my top 2. He turns over deuce 4 of clubs for the flush. There's a really nice guy across from me in the 4 seat who takes me down for a big pot. I add on $100. Then this happens. I get my aces cracked. I really overplayed them here. My struggle continues with big pocket pairs. Now I add on for another $250. I am in this game for $650 now. In my mind, I am thinking, what in the world are you doing? Again, I think I've been running so well, I just expect to hold up or to get there. I decide to get up, take a quick break. I was actually in the bathroom, but I don't think footage from the bathroom would be appropriate. I know I have misplayed some hands, run a little bad, but I'm thinking, what am I going to do here? I've got $250 in front of me. I end up giving myself a little build-up speech that sounds something like this.
You want to know? I want to know! Okay, I'm going to tell you. Because you had the talent to become a good fighter. And instead of that, you became a leg breaker. Some cheap, second-rate loan shark.
It's a living?
It's a waste of life.
Okay, maybe the speech in my head wasn't that fiery, but it was along the same line of thinking. I pick up Queen Jack. I am in the cutoff position. I go ahead and make the call. The small blind makes the call, and the big blind raises it up to $20. I am assuming this player has a pretty decent holding as he took a big pot from me earlier and is playing pretty close to the vest, but I am in position, so I quickly make the call, and we go to the flop heads up. The flop comes out, Queen A7 Rainbow. I flop middle pair with a decent kicker, but when he bets out 25, I really haven't seen this from him. I have to assume that he has a pretty big ace, but make the call. When the turn comes out and pairs the board sevens, he checks to me, and I just throw in a $100 chip. The 7 is a scare card. He shouldn't really put me on a 7, and I'm praying to God he folds, because this is going to leave me with $102. Sure enough, he folds. I turn over my hand. Again, I am trying to set a fairly wild reputation for a chance to get my money back. Just a few hands later, I look down at pocket fours, limp into the pot, hoping to see a free flop, but we get none of that as a player in the big blind decides to raise it up to $43. Just calling here is a bit reckless. I am in position though. I think if I push, he calls. I'm really just making the call here, hoping that I can outplay him post-flop in position. Everyone else in the hand folds. I get change from the dealer. We're getting set for the flop, which comes out not too hot for me. Jack 3-5 with 2 clubs. I really don't have much here at all, except for position working for me. The player in the big blind thinks for a little bit, but ultimately decides on a check. I check back, opting for a free card, which is really no help at all, except in the sense that it is a scare card for him, bringing in the front door flush. He thinks for a few seconds and ultimately decides on a bet of $25 into a pot of $130. I put in the call with absolute nothing, just hoping to float the turn. The river comes out an 8 of hearts, bringing in another scare card. He bets out $50. This time I decide to trust my instinct. I raise to 125. He promptly folds. I turn over my hand. Thank God he folded. I move on and survive this hand. Not long after, I look down at Ace Jack of Spades and decide to raise it up to just $10. This gets a quick call from the player to my left. The player to his left takes a minute and ultimately decides to fold. We get a few other calls around the table, and we're going to a pot 5 ways. The flop comes out, Queen 10-10, rainbow board, giving me a gut shot straight draw. It gets checked around to a pretty new player to the table in the 5 seat on the button, who decides to throw in a bet of $15. Then it gets folded around to me. I decide $15 sounds like a pretty good price, so I make the call. We get a fold from the player to my left, and we are going heads up to the turn.
Yeah, we're good. Oh, 5 more? Now we're good. At least my money's good.
The turn comes out a perfect king of clubs for me, hitting my straight draw. I quickly check, and the player on the button is taking some time with this. He eventually decides on a bet amount of $40. Now, he has just sat down and already seen me pull off a few bluffs, so I waste no time in raising it up to $140. Now he goes into the tank for quite a while, so I'm going to speed this up as he is thinking through my bet, looking at me, looking at the board. Again, this is sped up really fast, but at some point he's looking at my chips, and I know, look, if you make this call, you are committed to the rest of my chips in there. It just doesn't make any sort of sense to fold any decent hand. I am praying for a call, and ultimately that's what I get, and we are off to a river. The river comes out a pretty safe 9 of hearts. It really doesn't matter much because I'm committed to this pot and push in my last $47. The fact that he goes back into the tank makes me feel, okay, he doesn't have a full house. I think I'm pretty good. I really don't know how anyone could fold here. He ultimately makes the call, and I take down a pretty decent pot. He ends up showing a 10, but ultimately I just feel like, okay, I am back with some chips. I'm back here to do some damage and getting much closer to even. This one hand has really lifted my confidence, getting me much closer to even for the session, feeling a lot better knowing I could have been picked off at any time here. So when I look down at 7-8 of clubs in the cutoff position, there are a few calls, a few limps, and then a raise to $30. I decide to make the call. Just because I am closer to being even does not mean that I want to just change my style and tighten up. There is another call at the table, a fold, and we are going to a flop 3 ways. I'm in position with my suited connectors, and the flop comes out, bing! No, not really. I just have a gut shot straight draw. So when it is checked around to me, I opt on the free card. The turn comes out the Queen of Hearts, bringing in the front door flush. At this point, it's checked around to me again, and I can't help thinking, okay, I'm going to steal this one. So I put out a bet of $40, a little less than half pot, and I'm a little disappointed when I get a caller from the under the gun +1 player. The call on the turn is a little concerning for me, so when the river comes out a 4-liner to the flush with the 4 of hearts, it gets checked to me. Clearly, there's only one way I'm going to win this pot. That is by betting, so I decide on a bet of $75. This gets a quick fold, and I take down another decent pot, add it to my stack, and at this point, I'm pretty close to even now. So we've covered the punt portion of this video, a little bit of the return, but in the last hand, this turns out being a monster for me. I pick up King Jack of diamonds, I limp in to see a free card, and the player in the small blind, the player in seat 5 from the previous hand, I'm just going to let this sort of develop on its own because it's pretty funny. We're all kind of joking about no one respects his raises.
Can't respect your raise, sir. I'm sorry. I don't respect a lot of people's raises, though. So it's not just you.
There are now 3 players going to the flop, which comes out 4 Queen 10 rainbow. He puts out a bet of $35, which seems like a pretty good price, especially since the under the gun player decides to make the call. You know, eventually, after tanking for a bit.
35? Can't let you just take it from me.
We're going to the turn 3-handed. Think of the best card that could possibly come from my hand. I hit my gin card in the ace of diamonds, giving me the nuts, the nut straight, and a redraw to the nut flush. The player in the small blind, who we are all joking about not getting respect for his bets and raises, decides on a bet of $75. Bear in mind, there is still the under the gun player left to act, but with not too many chips behind, he goes deep into the tank now. In the meantime, I'm just considering what to do, if he calls, when he calls, how much to raise to get as many chips committed to this pot as possible. He finally opts on a call, and I look down and raise it up to $200, which gets a few laughs.
What the fuck?
This puts him into the tank for quite a while. I am obviously just praying for a call and another call from the under the gun player, but in the meantime, all I can do is sit there and wait. Now, I have sped this video up. I'm sorry it's taking so long, but this is just a pretty big decision here. He's looking at me, he's looking at my chips, he's cutting out chips himself, and ultimately decides to make the call. Now the player under the gun goes into the tank, but he ultimately decides on making the call as well. I think at this point, All three players in the hand are pretty committed to this pot, especially with the under the gun player only having $35 remain. I am just saying, please don't pair the board. I get a super clean run out with the 8 of spades. The initial better waits for just a moment. There are 2 other players in the pot and ultimately decides to check his option. This gets a quick all-in from the under the gun player. He has $35 remaining. Now I just need to decide how much I put into the pot. I could be wrong here, and all-in would probably get a call, but I decide on a sizing of 135. Not surprisingly, with the way this hand has played out, this puts the player in the small blind that's remaining deep into the tank, as I am frankly just so excited I can't even get the chips out there together. I know he has a strong hand, and there are just way too many chips in the middle of the pot, but has some choice words for me before he calls.
I did it again.
Of course, I'm hoping no one else has King Jack, but that really doesn't make any sense here with the way the hand was played out. Turns out both players had Ace Queen. What a score for me, hitting that ace of diamonds on the turn with only 2 aces in the deck, plus it was the ace of diamonds giving me the redraw to the flush. Ultimately, I just take down a mountain of chips. I stick around for a few orbits. I don't want to hit and run, but I am feeling pretty darn satisfied here. I mean, at one point I put 650 into this game, almost went bust, and now I am back up to 1250. Everything seems pretty good in my world right now, so I'm about to rack up, take off, and enjoy the evening. I know, this is the part where I ask you to subscribe if you enjoyed the video, to like, and to comment. Pretty sure you got that by now, but to be honest, subscribing really helps the channel. I'd love to grow, I'd love to produce more videos, so leave me a comment, let me know what you'd like to see. I'll be playing a couple days from now at a different venue. In the meantime, good luck, hope you enjoyed.